Hey, Mark, what's this week's Weisenheimer?
Hey, Mark, who gets this week's Weisenheimer Award?
Who does this week's Weisenheimer go to?
Rory from Survivor Vanuatu's got a question for you.
What's the Weisenheimer?
Wanu, how do you say that?
Vanuatu, I think.
Gesundheit.
I guess the idea for the documentary came, after years of telling people about this little town with this little TV station in Scottsbluff, Nebraska.
The company probably wouldn't mind if I'd slump forward into my coffee midway through the noon show, yes. So you go to a commercial, I think Jerry just left us,
Someone who's devoted their entire lives to that station, why aren't they doing more for him?
Good afternoon, I'm Jerry DeShung. It's Noisy Weekend.
Wow, he's really covered it up.
Buddy, are you recording this?
Buddy, I might be.
Made it back to Nebraska. Back to Nebraska.
Here we are.
God's country. I'm pretty sure I haven't been here since 1996. When I've never stepped in Scottsbluff at the same time, which is kind of remarkable to think about because we identify so strongly with it because it launched us in our respective paths in life.
My story is not so much me, but the stories that I've done from Vietnam through the civil rights, through the 70s and the 80s. You remember where you were at. I was here saying, ladies and gentlemen, there are planes flying into the Twin Towers in New York City. And having a tough time keeping composed.
We'll have a full report on world news tonight. I'm Peter Jennings in New York.
Dan Rather reporting. That's Nightly News for this Wednesday night. I'm Tom Brokaw.
Good afternoon, I'm Jerry DeShung. A little quieter for a few days in the region and then warming up. We'll be around 100 degrees on Wednesday. I'll have details on the weather along with the town crier and the markets. First though, we're going to take a look at the news. I did the news once 4 days by myself. I was snowed in at Hay Springs.
In the middle of this impending, blizzard, he called the governor personally to ask for a National Guard helicopter to get one of his engineers out to a radio antenna so they could fix it to keep the news going.
And actually ran the control board, the camera and everything. I just set up the camera, turn it on, turn the mic in, come running in, sit down on camera, do a little bit of news and say, we're going to be back with the weather in just a moment. Slide off camera, run in, run a few ads.
And he thought it was a long shot, but sure enough, the next day a National Guard helicopter arrived and got his engineer out to the antenna to make sure it stayed up.
Had the other camera set up on the weather board, turned the weather mic and the weather camera on, come running in front of the weather. Did 4 days of that. That was a workout, I'll tell you, and ran all the commercials.
When there was something going on that jeopardized people getting the information they needed, he was very serious about getting that information out there.
A can of fruit cocktail to eat. No cigarettes. Oh. What's that? Oh, you ready, bud? Okay, bud. It's going to be kind of quiet for a few days. I think we can enjoy that. However, it is going to be warming up.
Some of my greatest memories with my dad are actually watching Jerry on TV. You'd be hard pressed to find anyone who didn't know who he was.
And especially during the lunch hour, there was something me and my dad and me and my grandparents did often was we would sit down to lunch, turn on the news, and watch Jerry.
He was
as much of a celebrity as you can be in western Nebraska. I mean, there's not a lot of people out there. There's more cows than people, if I remember that statistic correctly.
He's definitely symbolic of the small market.
My first impressions of Jerry were, how long has this guy been here?
It's been 40 years, but I can't believe it because an entire lifetime has gone just in the blink of an eye to me.
Most people don't have any kind of career that lasts that long. I mean, that's incredible. And in one place, it does not happen. Not in this business, for sure.
All right, quite a little room over it, or?
About 4 inches.
Okay.
I have so much respect for Jerry. He is the guy that everybody looks to and trusts.
It's never been Jerry the newsman, the viewer type of a feeling to it. It was always just people. They were good enough to invite me into their homes every noon for the last 45 years, and we've had some pretty good visits during those times.
You know, there's more to our history than just the wagon ruts that took the pioneers to California and Oregon.
I've done it all, sports, weather, news, you name it, I've done it. Town Crier, Noon Review. Used to do 3 news shows a day, whether I was doing the weather, and I totaled it up sometime recently. It was like 20,000 weather forecasts or something.
Jerry DeShong, he did it his way. He is a treasure to work with, a great person, funny, witty.
And I've finished everything for the last 46 years with Take Care. And I don't know, about 8 years ago, something bad happened in here. I don't remember what, but I didn't say Take Care at the end of the block. And man, for 3 nights I couldn't sleep thinking something bad was going to happen, you know. But you enjoy Oregon Trail Days, Fur Trade Days. I'm back at noontime tomorrow. Join me then. Take care.
Have you heard of Scottsbluff?
No, I never heard of Scottsbluff. I had to look it up on Google Maps.
Do you want to live in Scottsbluff? Yeah, okay. Maybe he'll replace Jerry.
It was incredibly remote. I remember I was 23 years old, and I remember driving to Scottsbluff, and I looked at the moon, and I just remember thinking, if aliens abduct people, this is where they do it, is in this part of the country, because I had never seen anything like that.
My first real TV job, which will be in Scottsbluff, Nebraska.
It wasn't as if there was anything to do in town. There was one movie theater. I don't even think they showed matinees.
Governor Ben Nelson could trim as much as $42.4 million from the state's main budget bill.
My name is Eric Erickson. I worked in Scottsbluff from the beginning of 1997 to about September, I believe, of 1997. I made no money at all. I had to get a second job, and I worked at the Applebee's as a waiter. And there's something a little bit surreal when you're working at an Applebee's and you walk up to a table of people and you say, "Hi, my name is Eric, I'm going to be your server tonight." And they say, "Aren't you the guy who anchors the news?" And yes, and would you like fries with that?
It was a tough place to work from the standpoint that, you know, we were constantly working with very antiquated equipment that was always breaking down.
You had really bad equipment. It's like you needed to make cookies and all you had was flour. But you had to make cookies.
Officials say there's been more improvements in research against the multiple sclerosis in the last 5 years than in the last 50.
I remember meeting Jerry for the first time in Scottsbluff. He was a little bit like the grand poobah of not only the station, KDUHF, Channel 4 if I'm not mistaken, but he was a little bit like the grand poobah of town. Everyone knew him. Whenever you would go out to do a story, people would ask about Jerry. He had been there forever. He was a little bit like a staple. I doubt that Jerry remembers me at all.
Better weather here in the Panhandle.
The name Eric Erickson.
I do. Was he here?
Yeah, he was here for 6 months.
Remember if he was here or at KFCF. But once again, another anchor.
It was like a revolving door of college kids right out of college getting their feet wet in the world of broadcast journalism. So there's no way that he probably remembers who I am. I like to think I'm memorable.
Well, let's check the Nebraska Pick 5 and the Powerball numbers for today. The Powerball is $11 million, and the numbers are, let's go to the numbers. Okay, there they are.
After about 7 or 8 months, I was definitely ready to be gone.
Another day done, Jerry.
Another buck. That wasn't a bad one. You can see why them old people love me. Because I'm an old people.
There have been a lot of tug-of-wars, and Jerry wins most of them because we like Jerry, and Jerry is Jerry, and the people in the panhandle of Nebraska like Jerry. The ones that he can't win are the things that are law, the closed captioning with the FCC, and as a result he had to start using a teleprompter instead of reading the wire copy, you know, each page and just throwing it. So that had to change. But most of the little battles, and they've just been little battles, but you know, Jerry's won.
You had mentioned this once, that you'd never even made $30,000 a year. Is that?
That would probably be top end. I do know one thing, but in 50 years with the company, I never got an hour of overtime. I put in 89 hours one week. I tell the story. I got home one morning about 2 in the morning, and I sat down on the bed and I dozed off. And I think I woke up a little bit later, and I had to wake my wife. I didn't know if I was getting undressed and going to bed or getting dressed and going to work.
Jerry has never been appreciated by the Duhamels, and you know, he's too proud a man to say that, you know, yeah, they should have helped more, they should have done something for me.
He has not made the big bucks, and no matter the weather, there's just really nothing glamorous at all about what he has done all these years, except that he's just always been there, stable, steady. You know, we could always count on Jerry.
Is Duhamel still in charge?
Well, yeah, the dad is, and then he's got 6 kids that are got a big family.
Wow.
Every one of them that hits 21, I get demoted a little bit.
Yeah.
But I don't blame him. Helene's his daughter, and she's married to the current station manager, who's come a long way in 3 months.
Surprising enough.
Oh yeah, well, you see what hard work it gets him, man.
Yeah, go on, bust your ass.
You can marry the boss's daughter, and hell, you can move up in the company.
Well,
and they're good. I mean, they're hard work. I'm sure they come by it honestly.
There was no 401k match. There was no, you know, for the first probably 30 years, they didn't have a 401k.
And I don't know how successful it would have been throughout the years without my dad there, not just as an anchor, but as the station manager, the news director.
You know, watching your footage, I got to see where the anchor desk was and where the weather was, and the way he had to, you know, work his way from one end to the other real quick. He'd been doing that all these years, and you know, as a viewer, I had no idea.
Actually, it always made me think a little bit of Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, how he was in a wheelchair behind the scenes, kind of a loose comparison, but Jerry would get on the news and be very confident and very stately and professional, and yet he had this limp that really, I think, impeded his movement offside the set.
I'm kind of like President Roosevelt from that standpoint. A lot of people don't know I'm crippled up as I am. What happened to your legs, Mr. DeShong? A bad break and an old age.
I know he has a passion for what he does, but that doesn't mean you need to kill yourself doing it. Frankly, I think corporate America has a responsibility as well, no matter how big or small the corporation may be.
I fell up here on the set. First time I've ever done that, but it's kind of a dead fall. I can't put my knees out in front of me, so it's just sort of a kaboom, and I knew I'd done it. I broke a rib pretty bad. But I was afraid if I said anything, and maybe we couldn't go to the ball game, so I didn't say anything. But unfortunately, by the game time on Saturday, I wasn't in very good shape, but I couldn't do anything about it, and then I confessed. Marg pumped me for information why I was having trouble talking, and I had to tell her what happened, and couldn't do anything about it till Monday. And there's not much you can do with a broken rib anyway, but. Oops, excuse me. You know, it had to be kind of special 50, 60 years ago when the latest Tom Mix or Gene Autry movie came to the movie house in Oshkosh, Nebraska. I mean, a dime would get you a cartoon, a cereal, and a double feature.
Hey, hold it down.
I'll meet you outside. Excuse me. Excuse me. Well, unfortunately, they don't show movies anymore at the old Oshkosh Opera House and Movie Theater. Movies killed by changing tastes, changing times, high costs, and television.
There aren't many people that do that anymore in a small market television station. Very few. Most of them are young people that stay there for a year or two or three and then they move on to the next bigger market. Jerry never did that. He kind of found his niche here, decided this is where he wanted to stay, and he's been here now for, like I said, 40 years, and that's a constant that you can't replace at any other television station.
What would have happened if 35 years ago, when I was young and good looking, had gone to the station in Vegas or Des Moines, and you can only think, boy, I really would have done well, and I really would have been happy, and I could be shooting up on Skid Row, perhaps, for all I know.
ABC 26 weather with meteorologist Chris Rhodes.
Boy, it almost felt like we weren't even living in New Orleans today. This is beautiful weather.
I worked there from 1995 to 1996, so I think it was about 20 months.
How many parking spaces will be used by McDonald's to build a restaurant?
People tend to stay a year, 2 years, and then keep moving on. And so he's had to have seen that many people come through. I can't imagine that station without him. We can all come and go, but he's Scottsbluff.
The main anchors are usually over here. And then this is the weather desk. This is the weather center. In Scottsbluff, Nebraska, I stayed for 2 years. And then there I moved to Lincoln, Nebraska. Then from Lincoln, I went to Colorado Springs, then Colorado Springs to Honolulu, Hawaii. And then from Honolulu to here in San Diego, where I've been for the past 8 years.
The 80s might seem just feel chilly.
Yeah, you say, boy, it's 80, it feels like it's 85 out.
That's right. Thanks, Jerry. The Colorado Rockies.
It was a special place I was excited to get to. I think probably after about 10 months or a year, I thought, okay, I'm ready to move forward now into my next TV market. Once I left, I think back to, what I learned there. I am proud to have been a part of that.
You were pretty much chief cook and bottle washer at that time. There was no photographer, there was no editor, there was no producer. You did it all. It wasn't easy. It was really hard. I truly think that this is why we became so close so quickly, all of us, because you almost counted on each other, or you knew that this is all you guys had.
You know, even though the movies of the 30s and 40s were probably considered a little bit corny when compared with today's celluloid sex and violence epics, they really weren't too bad. Ooh, looks like a good one.
See, yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, see, the lunchroom is gone. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. It seems so much smaller down here than I remembered. Like, I remember this wall going back further or something, but maybe it's because of the way the desks are organized.
Where was your desk?
My desk was here, facing the wall.
That was where mine was.
And you know, the one computer in the station that had the AP on it and things was right here. And so, you know, you'd look every morning for AP wire copy and stuff here. And I remember the news director was here, and maybe they still are, I don't know. But that desk faced out. This is where we kept all the gear, all the camera gear back in the day. And I'll never forget it, maybe you remember this, but there was a sign on the wall right above where the gear was that had a picture of dead cattle. And it said, if you break a camera, you're dead meat. And I remember the first day I was here, Mitch Krebs, the news director, said to me, we've had so many cameras broken, we just have to send this message. If you break a camera, I can't imagine that you won't get fired. Day one, that's what he said to me, first job in television.
was moving to Scottsbluff, some of the girls at the station that I was going to work at said that, hey, there's another sports guy that works at the competition. He's actually looking for a roommate. And I said, really? I said, is that normal?
This is where I live. I'm in the basement, actually, a small basement apartment.
That apartment, my half of the rent was $86 a month.
The apartment that we lived in pretty much was a tinderbox.
You can't be adversarial when you're living with the guy from the other station. You know, that's your roommate. And that media apartment, I've seen that media apartment or that media housing take place in other markets too.
To get to my room, I had to go through Pete's room. So you can only imagine the problems that created if Pete happened to have a person over for the evening. So, oh man, great times.
And I think the two of you even dated the same girl at one point.
Yeah, that's probably true. Although I think he dated her second. I would like that to be on the record.
If you ever watch the show The League, then yes, Peter Thompson and Ari Bergeron are Eskimo brothers.
He was second, definitely. I definitely can tell you that.
You know, when you're living in a small town like that, sometimes you take what you can get.
It just worked out. Met up with Mark as I got into town. We went and looked at, I think, maybe 2 apartments. Took it right away, and yeah, and then of course it led to the friendship that that there is now, and helped get me the job at KDUH.
We all hung out. We all made absolutely no money. I think there were some cases where people from one station dated people from another station. It was in a lot of ways like an extension of college, like we were going to grad school, and Jerry was our teacher.
From St. Louis, investigative reporter Chris Negus, who put that story together.
It seems like this job has given me the opportunity to go places I never thought I'd go. I mean, I was in Rome to cover the Pope. Some of these stories have gone national. Things that I would have never envisioned happening when I was in that small market. And so it's a lot of fun to be in a bigger place and to see bigger stories.
Hi everyone, I'm Curtis Shea for CCTV News. You're watching Asia Today.
You have, gosh, everything in the bigger market. Live capabilities, when live capabilities is just going out and being live no matter where in your coverage area.
We don't do live remotes. I would love to be down at the parade route and, doing some sideline thing at the football game, but we just don't have the remote capabilities to do that. So it's a trade-off, the toys and the bells and whistles, and just a visit with an old friend.
The usual old-style live trucks. And we have 3 of these guys. This guy actually has 3 cameras on it. It's this newest technology called Teradek, and so it's got 3 cameras on it that we can actually roll the cameras while we drive.
I-Team reporter Ryan Kath joins us now with the update. Ryan? And David, I've heard from a bunch of drivers who also experienced this RMV nightmare.
This is kind of the weather pod. How many computers do you need to do a forecast? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nice little flat screen TV to show the maps and the animation, and it doesn't stop there. Got this whole workspace that goes all the way around, and another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 flat screens here in the Weather Center.
I had a 90-hour week one time just because we were shorthanded in Hay Springs. We didn't have a lot of help available, but for whatever reason, it's Jerry the weatherman. And even now, if I go out and it's kind of windy or snowy or nasty, it's, hey, Jerry, what's the deal with the weatherman? We're not paying you for this. Yeah, that's true.
This week on News 485, Chris shows you the craziest moments.
Is there a reason you guys are running away from us?
I mean, there are days where I'm like, wow, it's really bizarre. I'm in Miami looking for an individual to confront, or I'm in Dallas or Los Angeles. I was in Portland, Maine, all over the place for stories. And I guess I don't sit there and think about it while I'm in the moment, but the opportunities here have been much greater.
The camera I'm talking into now is better than the ones we've had here in the studio. You make do with people and equipment, and I don't like that. I would like to see upgraded equipment so that we can give the viewer the very best possible product.
It is freezing out here, Brett. It's what, 6 degrees?
TV news is a small industry, and yes, but I have heard of Scottsbluff. I worked with Jennifer Roth in Clarksburg, West Virginia, who worked there. And I remember them telling me that they would actually have to use a typewriter to do their stories.
The teleprompter would get jammed and would stop, and all the paper would get, and the high school student running the camera might notice right away, or maybe not. So, I mean, here in Denver, I don't think I've ever seen our teleprompter go down. I bet in Scottsbluff you had something go wrong with the teleprompter once, twice a week. That might have been a good week.
There's Los Angeles, and if I back way up, right up here by Denver, Jerry, there's Scottsbluff. It might have honestly been the smallest market in the country. Resources, there's no comparison. So this is our studio here at ABC7 in Los Angeles. It's just a different experience. It's it's LA. It's not Scottsbluff. When ABC puts The Bachelor on and The Bachelorette, a lot of times that main character will come in here, and our entertainment guy George Pinocchio will do an interview, and these are things you just didn't see in Scottsbluff.
James Buster Douglas is back in the U.S. today.
At dinner time, I would actually record games at home and then bring them in and cut them off my VHS player. Honest truth, you can't do that here, obviously.
This whole city, for the most part, looks exactly the same as it did 21 years ago.
The whole area is very, it's not very well off, We know how to make a dollar stretch, because there's a lot of people in that area that work a lot longer than they should just to make ends meet, because their companies didn't take care of them the way they should have.
This place looks like it's stuck in the 1950s in a lot of ways, and even when we were here, it felt like the time went slower. I'm not even making that up. It felt like the evening morning we were here, it really went slower.
It's really tough for a lot of very, very good people. I know some unbelievably talented people who aren't working in this or their chosen profession because the economy is just a nightmare.
This is where I lived, in this tan house connected to the liquor store, and it still looks exactly, well, it's not quite connected, but it looks exactly, I think the liquor store is a different name, but otherwise it looks exactly the same. I saw that and it just blew me away. It blew me away. But it looks, I think the same drapes are hanging in the window of my apartment there. I really do.
It's just within the last, 5-6 years that they're actually able to get smartphones to work up there.
I live in a city that looks starkly different than it did when I moved there 6 years ago. And this place it's been 2 decades and it hasn't changed at all. Sad for me to see that it hasn't been able to progress and that it's still as poor as it was then.
KDOH used to have an anchor here. They don't do that anymore. They anchor out of Rapid City. They do have a 5:30 p.m. show that concentrates on things out of Scottsbluff, but it just isn't quite the same.
We lose a little bit of control over content. They might do some rewriting up there and we have some disagreements, but I think, given the alternative, it works fairly well.
The newsroom is small and it's tight, but I know by me anchoring it here and by having producers, there's a decent amount of content coming in. You ought to watch it.
And everybody here in Scottsbluff knows it's anchored out of Rapid City, and it's kind of a shell game as to them trying to make it look like it's out of Scottsbluff.
You guys are doing the noon. You do cut-ins in the morning.
No cut-ins in the morning. That comes from Rapid City.
Okay. So not during Good Morning America or anything like that?
No.
I don't think it ever goes back to a full-blown news organization. The only way that would happen would be if somebody else bought it. And there, as you know, there are very few family-owned broadcasting companies anymore.
Every market that I've ever seen where they bring in another city's feed has limited success because local news' value is local. I think the idea of a locally owned small town station being viable, unfortunately, is probably not going to happen anymore. We've got these huge station groups that are acquiring all these stations from little markets to big markets.
If they can get more for their dollar, that's what they're going to do. Hey, maybe they don't have Jerry anymore, but they can bring in 2 more college students out of grad school and have them do 2 or 3 times more what Jerry's doing.
Well, it's just coded territory, and that's more of a production type thing, and that covers Wyoming and South Dakota and Nebraska. So once again, I think you can do more with less by just incorporating everything into one generic setting, coded territory. Wasn't necessarily I was demoted or anything, it's just, hey, here's the way we're going to do things. Not like we had a meeting or something and decided after 45 years that young and pretty would take over. I like him. Initially it's people, well, what happened to Jerry? Well, Jerry's not smart enough to put all that stuff together, so we got somebody that is.
We just don't live in a world where people are as loyal as they used to be, and that someone like him is going to be as loyal to an audience and a station as they used to be. I told you when I watched that, I thought that's the last one of those. I hope I'm wrong, but it sure feels like it.
I haven't watched the local news in, I don't know, years.
Honestly, when you say news anchor, the only one that comes to mind is Ron Burgundy.
People have short attention spans. That's what we're told. That you've got to grab them within the first 30 seconds. They don't want to sit there and listen to somebody, some talking head.
How are you consuming the news?
Twitter.
I read the news on the internet.
Internet.
My phone.
I just go online.
Apps. It's all apps on your phone. What's easiest, quickest to get to?
I normally get news from Facebook before I hear it or see it on the news.
90% on my phone, Twitter.
There's not much time for anything else.
I just don't watch television very much.
If I'm not talked into watching a local newscast, I'm not going to go do it unless I get some reason. Generally, it's either weather or breaking news.
It's on my terms, on my time, and so I don't have to sit around at 5 p.m. and wait for someone to read the news to me. I can go to all these websites.
Local news just doesn't have quite the role now that it did probably when Dad started, even 20 years ago.
The whole concept behind broadcast, at least originally, was FaceTime. You're putting it into your living room and we're going to have a conversation. We're going to build a relationship. We're going to be personable. We're going to feel like we know each other. Those binds, I think, will be broken in the future.
You better be a good friend to that person at noon because you don't need him anymore. You better have some sort of a connection, whether it's some old toot that's been doing it for 47 years or something to compete with the YouTubes and the Facebooks.
Yeah, Betsy Webster, KCTV 5 News.
When you're doing breaking news, you're juggling the Twitter, so you're trying to tweet something, you're hearing it, you're taking your notes, you're tweeting it, but then, let's just say that if you're not a multitasker, this is not the job for you.
Studies have demonstrated that people are not really good at multitasking. We think we are. Well, in the media industry, you're being asked to do a whole bunch of different things for a bunch of different audiences. Well, if you're doing that, what are you giving up?
How do you tell a story in 140 characters? I resisted Twitter like there was nobody's business, but even an old dog like me has to get on there and post stuff to my Twitter account.
Before, you wanted to get the information on the broadcast news before your competition. Now you want to tweet it out before your competition does. So really, your deadlines are every minute.
Some of the percentages we've seen of people who are actually watching a newscast are in single digits in some markets. You have a totally distracted viewer that needs a talent to be able to call them, to tell them what's important, to tell them why they need to watch.
I don't think there's turning back now. Our phones are leading the way.
So now there's an obligation to fill not only airtime on TV, but then to continue to connect with your audience via internet and also mobile devices. So that really creates this dimension of being on the job all the time.
Advertising's shifting to the web now because everybody's watching the web. So people are still out there watching, Mark. I just don't think this is a dinosaur. Hate to say that because it's what I do, but you know.
Is it, I think, Vine, where it's 6 seconds, you know, and so what's the news business going to be like in 15 years when all these kids that are growing up now, you've got 6 seconds to get their attention.
Vine is a social media app. It's video based. About 225,000 right now followers on my page. The advertisers are going to go to where the people are. And a whole lot of people are on Vine right now. Actually, finally just got enough. I think we're going to be able to pay cash for a new roof. So that's nice. I get to actually literally put a roof over my family's head.
Welcome back to The List. I'm Ariel Wessler.
You know, The List, and they're doing a show called The Now. I think those are all ideas to try and create new news and information programming that's a little more contemporary.
They're trying to get those 20, 30-year-old folks who really aren't watching television anymore. And if they are, maybe they're just DVRing, but they're not watching the nightly news. But they might watch something like The List because, again, it has that feeling of, oh, this is what my Facebook feed would have on it. Will the Bucks go to the Super Bowl?
Ooh, good question.
The Skim is an email newsletter condensed into a brief overview of all of the latest news targeted at millennials.
It's very creative writing. It's not like your standard NBC, ABC News. So you get like everything you need to know within quick, small paragraphs.
My wife took me to a course, Computers for Idiots or something at the college. So I punched up a Deshaun, and this picture comes on, and it's a dominatrix, some woman with a leather mask and a cat of nine tails, and they can't get the damn thing off. My wife's going, "What the hell are you doing?" The instructor, "That's interesting." And I never went back to the class.
Leonard! Every station has a Lynn. Every station has a guy that is an oddball and an eccentric, and you can't do it without him.
Lynn, there's a quick out cue on that, bud.
Lynn directed, might have run tapes, because I don't think Jerry used a whole lot of tape. And then he also would run in there and set the camera shots. I mean, it was Lynn and Jerry, the two of them alone.
Jerry hired Leonard Hall, who was a developmentally disabled guy. Would talk to you about stuff and you really didn't know what he was talking about.
He used to come and jug Shasta like during the commercial breaks.
They've never cut us yet, have they all? No. We ever been late coming back for the 5 or the 12:30? Nah.
Young college kids come in, you know, we know it all. Hey, you sit on that desk, you're in Lynn's world, and you're gonna do things his way.
Lynn would kind of saunter on in and be visiting with you, and you're thinking during the commercial break, like, let's get it done here, and he would just chug the Shasta, visit, kind of get it done. But yeah, there's some definitely characters there.
We get along really well. He's pretty easy to work with.
Is Lynn still around? Probably not. Lynn has passed away. Oh, well, that's... Oh.
You had to know how to take Lynn. He could have been one of the biggest pains in the ass that ever lived. He could be stubborn and obstinate, but he was a good control room person. So it was, you know, he liked to talk, liked to take a trip, and you'd hear about it for the next 6 months. You know, he's kind of a savant in every highway and every place he had eaten at for 3 weeks, and even make a calendar trip and give it to me. It was, I appreciated it, but that was Lynn.
That was Jerry's right-hand man, and as funny as the images that we had of Lynn and the experiences that we had of Lynn, you know, that's an indicator, I feel, of what's happening to the news that we knew back then. It's going to slowly die out.
You hate to have any coworker or friend pass away, especially when you're my age, because Lynn's quite a little younger than I am, and it just, every time you lose a friend, you lose a little bit of your past or your history, and you know, there's not that many left out there. A few names that I see once in a while on Facebook wanting to be my friend. All my siblings and parents have passed away, and now as I begin to lose friends and coworkers, it really makes your mortality come into question. It's not a fun place to be right now.
2, 3, 4.
Two of us worked at the TV station growing up. I worked in the control room. I worked as a camera operator.
It's probably what, 10 maybe employees at the TV station. So when 3 out of the 10 are Deschongs, bad things are bound to happen, especially when you've got 2 brothers, both stubborn.
Anyone who has brothers know we didn't always get along.
There was an incident at some point along the way where they, you know, a tape was thrown at another brother, and you know, my dad had to intervene.
He got on me out on the headset, and he got after me about something, and we got into a big argument after the newscast. It must have gotten a little out of control because the next day my dad fired me.
I couldn't fire him, but you know, we just, you know, at that point in time, you know, it was better that we didn't work together.
Of course, then he goes home, tells his mom, and I got to face her in a couple hours. I understand you canned our son. Well, you know, you do what you got to do, and we've worked through it.
I just found that with 3 boys, you were always going to have 2 that would get along, but the third one, and it could be any mixture of there was always going to be one that wasn't going to quite go along with it.
KSDF, the company that owned them, shut it down and still owns the land and the building, but doesn't broadcast anything out of there.
Why did KSTF shut down? There was so much transition there. They couldn't keep anybody there on a consistent basis. People over at KDUH were a little more professional. When you have someone that's like Jerry Deschong, that's been there for eons, I think it's easier for people to follow a station.
Because we do have that secondary outlet out to Scottsbluff, there is still the interest with Scottsbluff for what we do. You know, Cheyenne's still the baby, of course, but we do, you know, dive into a little bit of the Scottsbluff market just because of, you know, having the Scottsbluff station there.
We start things off tonight in sports at 6 with a segment that's a little different than most. This is our final newscast as NBC 40, the final time that I get to say things like, go nope. The death blow for NBC 40 was when NBC, the network, our affiliation ran out. How was little mom and pop NBC at the shore really hurting the behemoth that's up in Philadelphia?
So if you're this mom and pop station in a small market and you got to fill your lineup, you're kind of last on the priority card. I'm a syndicator. I'm going to sell my show to a station that's got 135 stations or one that's got 1. I mean, I just think business-wise, it's tough to make that decision against that.
You and I worked for Hamel Broadcasting, and I've worked for other family-owned, family-run businesses that were media stations, and then they've all been swallowed up by 2 or 3 of the biggies.
You know, as so often happens in these cases, actually the staff was notified of the sale about an hour before it actually took place and went public, and we haven't had a great deal of contact either with KOTA or the new owners, so I don't have a lot of information. It'll take a few months to go through the FCC application process.
I can't answer what this new company would do. I think a lot of people, you know, why do you do it? Why do you keep going? Well, in my family, it was really important. But it's also dollars and cents, and as long as they can pull money out of the market with advertising, that's how you pay the salaries.
I just think it's old school, but it's like dial telephones and remote controls and things like that. There was just something about getting a check and looking at it and, like I say, making a deposit and visiting with the ladies at the drive-through and then holding out a few bucks that went into a private stash. So if there was an emergency or we wanted to go someplace nice, I could pull out a few bucks. But now with direct deposit, my wife says, well, you can go to an ATM machine and get it out. That's no fun.
It's been difficult and painful for me. change is hard when you've been doing something for me for 30 years. How much more painful for him having done something for 40 years and then have a new company come in and tell him it's going to be done a different way.
I think it's time to shut the doors at KDUH and or CODA, whatever it is now, but I think that they'll probably just take it from South Dakota and just have someone in the bureau, you know, grabbing news here and there.
I very much see the end of KDUH. The end is closer than we all think.
These small markets, how they will survive, if they will survive, and maybe when Jerry quits, that is the day they turn off the lights and say no more local news there.
This is someone that you relate to as a viewer who is like you.
I grew up on a farm south of Gearing, Nebraska. You know, for us, Jerry was part of our life every day. He was the news.
People rely on him every day, and it's kind of like an addiction.
I remember my grandma's house. I remember the TV. I remember everything about it. And every day when I was 4 and 5 years old, we would watch the Noon Review with Jerry, and that was almost 40 years ago.
Can there be another Jerry DeShong in western Nebraska?
I don't see how.
Jerry will be irreplaceable. When Jerry leaves, I imagine a lot will change.
To fill his shoes, I don't think anybody could do that. I definitely would not want to do the noon show.
It's like coming in after an icon. So it'll be interesting to see what they do.
The Nebraska State Patrol wraps up a 2-month-long initiative. The news business has evolved so much, it's tough to keep up. Only on CODA Territory News tonight.
I believe I have to scoot over for that. Thanks, bud.
Like I said, I'm more than happy to cut this at 9 in the morning.
Oh, if Mr. Hall, if we had anybody here at 9 in the morning.
When our station manager approached me and said, we'd like to offer you the news director position, it's, you know, my first thought is, well, what about Jerry? I don't think you're going to ever have a replacement for him to be the next Jerry DeShong. But you could take the tutelage that he has laid for the past 4+ decades and try and do the best job you can. This year's board president is Chris Nelson. Last time we sat down and talked, I was recently appointed to the post of news director at KDUH Television, and I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and served about 2 years at the helm there before kind of jumped at the opportunity to come out here and kind of get back in the field. When I was appointed to news director, I'm thinking, all right, I'm following the legacy here, and you know, those were very big shoes to fill, to say the least, and you know, I don't know if anyone can ever fill those shoes, because he's one in a million. I mean, and you can come in there with all the ambitions in the world, but when you really size up to what Jerry is, it's crazy to think that anyone else can follow exactly those footsteps.
Excited to share that we are ready to launch the all-new NBC Nebraska Scottsbluff newscast.
Brand new, everything is strategically designed so the robotic cameras can shoot different parts of the studio without moving. So the cameras through fiber cable that's where the direction comes from Lincoln. So everything is done through the fiber.
So we're kind of all spread out, so we can cover the entire state, but we can bring it together at once and show a newscast for one particular area. We do it spread out, but it all comes together nicely.
There's a meteorologist and I do their 6 a.m. show, broadcast live through Scottsbluff and Alliance, those towers. And then Jerry does the noon show, and we help produce that, and then of course it's directed from Lincoln, and sometimes the meteorologist sits here. Okay. So the weather anchor and meteorologist and the news anchor are based in this building, so then anchoring done out of here, main producing done out of here, the reporting, the news gathering, and the sports all down out of Scottsbluff.
But we also have the opportunity to be live from the field. And our reporters absolutely love it. And Jerry thinks it's just a fantastic thing that now you don't need a satellite truck and a whole crew and hundreds of thousands of dollars. You take this box, which is called a TVU, and it uses 4G cellular service. You can get a very nice live audio and visual signal out of there.
By investing in that television station, and really what is now its first local media company with websites and apps and all the things that they have not had for their local community for all these years, Jerry's been that ambassador. He's been the one. That investment is so critical to what we do as a company. That is why we will sustain.
I've worked in the industry for over 20 years and I've never seen such a centralized operation like that, where you've got control rooms for 4 different stations in one building, stations that are spread out by hundreds and hundreds of miles.
To walk in the control room or into the studio and look around, you think, well, hello, it's a green wall, classy operation. But doing the weather in Hay Springs once and just caught a little glimpse of something behind me, and a huge snake was crawling out of a crack in the concrete wall. You just keep talking, but I'm not crazy about snakes. So this snake den, you choose. I like this a lot.
May I first direct your attention to the screen for a tribute to Jerry DeShong.
For 50 years, he's been the face and voice of the Pride in the Panhandle.
Good afternoon, Jerry DeShong.
Gordon, Nebraska native Jerry DeShong started at KDUH in 1966 as a master control operator.
Just a moment, there's a control panel or a button here someplace. Kind of curious as to just what it is it does.
A few months ago, a lady called me at home, and I usually don't accept those calls if you don't recognize the call, and I picked it up, and she said, Jerry, this is Teresa. I'm 86, and I live in Sydney. But since you switched over to NBC, we can't get you on the noon show anymore. And my husband and I watched you for 50 years, and he's gone, and I've been watching you for years now because I can understand each and every word you say. So I'm calling for 2 reasons. One, to see if you can get your station back on the cable system in Sydney. And if not, I just wanted to hear your voice one last time, maybe. Of course, my wife's sitting there. What are you wearing, Jake? I said, no. No, it's really, it's Teresa.
This is Jerry DeShong on a Kimball County back road.
I do not need a huge amount of, I don't need a whole lot to live on. I get my Egg McMuffin in the morning with my senior coffee, and I don't spend a great deal of money.
You have a senior coffee and a
Close enough, dear.
Yeah, have a good day.
Thank you. That'll have them all talking.
No TV executive out there has the answer as to what the future of television and news is going to be.
After buying NBC Universal from GE just a few years back, Comcast has now reached a deal to acquire Time Warner Cable in a $45 billion all-stock transaction.
Tech companies Apple, Google, or Amazon could be buyers as they all put together more video offerings. And for content creators, this deal creates more pressure to consolidate.
Question. Can you give us a question? I'm not going to give you a question. Can you stay categorically? You are fake news.
It's an industry that doesn't know its future. But one day it will. One day they'll figure it out, and then it'll finally be stable.
You're just doing your job day after day after day, and hoping that it would remain, but worrying also that it would remain in a form that nobody enjoyed very much. Well, I see they're still on the air, but it's not a very good product. Now I think we're still on the air and it is a good product.
You know, there's a guy I want to sit down with and have a couple beers and just talk.
Part of me, honestly, that feels guilty because I guess I was so busy sort of trying to find my own way in this business when I left KUH that I never stopped to like think, maybe I should call Jerry, maybe I should send Jerry a letter and tell him how I'm doing. So it's nice that I get an opportunity to say, you know, how much you meant to me when you were in Scottsbluff.
When I watched it, I felt nostalgic for seeing somebody, you know, a quality journalist like that, and at the same time concerned about the future, about seeing people who aren't in the business anymore because they weren't going to evolve.
You know, that man has taken the sandwich and not complained about it for 30, 40, how long? 50 years. And just done it because it's what he does and it's who he is.
And you're a legend, whether you want to be or not, you're going to be.
The way things have gone is that small market television has been going away. And to me, there's no doubt that Jerry's presence at this station for as long as he has been here is one of, if not the primary driver of why this station has remained where it is.
Thank you for taking a chance on this girl from LA and bringing me into your station and teaching me how to be a journalist.
Getting that phone call from you, I remember it was a mid-September afternoon, and you changed my life with that phone call.
It'll have the same feels like when Johnny Carson retired or when David Letterman retired. You know, there's something that's just not there anymore. And we move on with our lives and we'll have a new anchor and someone else will take that spot. But you always look back on it and go, those were good times.
Whatever comes after this station, we hope that it is well-deserved and you enjoy every moment of it.
And I really don't know what I will think when it does end all of a sudden, one way or another. Heartbreak or joy or a period of adjustment, I don't know. There's been so many rewinds and restarts in 5 decades that I always thought over the last 20 years that the company would walk in and shut her down anyway, turn it into a remote operation. We were pretty close to that at various times, you know. But we hung on. It's been good. Good way to finish. Now I'm going to take the weekend off, but I will be back on July the 3rd. Same place. I'm going to take the 4th of July off. I hope to see you somewhere at a lake or a fireworks display. Until then, you take care.
What other avenues are you pursuing in your life?
Well, I hear Jerry DeShong is going to retire in a year or so.
Is there, with retirement, how far is it? Is it about a year?
Oh, like I say, a couple of years probably. My audience and I got married together. We raised our families together. We buried our parents together, and we grew old together. If I'd hit the Powerball next week, there would be some drastic changes made.
Have you set up a time frame for a potential retirement, or
Well,
are you just kind of taking it one day at a time?
One day at a time, Mark. I didn't put away a ton of money. If I hit the Powerball, my timeline will change a great deal. And that's kind of the Duhamel retirement plan. They send me 2 lottery tickets a month and say good luck. 49 years is nice, but there's got to be some people out there going, geez, wrap it up, DeShong, for crying out.
Well, can you share your timeline yet? Have you?
I would think within a year.
Okay.
For sure. We've got to get the house on the market. I don't think we'll have any trouble moving it or anything, but then, you know, just the process itself is kind of frightening to me.
We've got a, Jerry fell on his stairs last week, and you know, we know that we have to get out of this house with all its stairs. So
Yeah.
that's an issue. So, yeah, we gotta change some things.
John?
Yes,
sir.
Would you bring my coffee cup in and put it on my ear?
Cold and old have caught up with me, and it's time to step back and spend a little more time with family. I've rounded third, and I'm heading for home. So after 51 years and some 10,400 news shows, I'll be signing off one last time. I will simply say thank you. I will miss you very, very much. Take care. Goodbye.
Hey, what's up, Mark?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good.
Just driving home. What you up to?
I'm back in Kansas City.
Yeah, you just got back. Long drive. How was it, man?
Yeah, it was interesting. A little bit different than my previous trips, let's just say that.
Does this feel how you thought it would feel? Does it feel different?
You know, it feels good, even though I wasn't looking forward to retirement. I'm sad about the whole thing. People have been so nice today. I mean, popcorn, cookies, donuts, the whole 9 yards, cards and letters and phone calls. I just hope people don't forget me, and to all those who have gone before me, it's been a special 50 years because of those people. Cut.
You know how it was kind of odd that I didn't get invited? You know, after shooting this project for 11 years, I had to find out secondhand and then, you know, get out to the station. So there's this kind of this feeling of, why didn't I get invited?
Maybe seeing this biggie on some documentary on some big station sometime?
You never know.
Okay, well, I'm not investing any money in it.
I just got this feeling when I showed up there that the management didn't want me there. And one of their general managers comes in. And he comes up to me and says hello, and you know, we've chatted before, and
we're all family. Gray Television's a family. That's the only way I can describe it. We're family. And what do? We take care of family.
And he says, well, are you planning on interviewing any of the staff? And I said no. But he said, well, if you were gonna interview them, we're gonna have to get a release.
A release for what?
Something they might say, I don't know.
I mean, they've never made you do something like that.
Well, it's always been a very friendly project. You think that's why you didn't get the invite then? They didn't want you there. You know, it makes you think, was Jerry nudged or pushed a little bit?
I think he was pushed, or at least nudged from what it sounds like. It sounds like Gray is probably downsizing a bit. Someone like Jerry probably makes a little bit more money than they maybe really want. And who knows, maybe what are their long-term plans for that station? Maybe they don't want Jerry right there anymore. Maybe they're going to make that a satellite station.
Take care. Goodbye. What, you want me to do the lineup after that? Okay, let's check out our lineup tonight. We have 30 seconds left. The weather could be the most important thing midway through. You be careful. Out of time. Nice recovery, Mr. DeShong. Thanks, gang. Thanks for everything. You be careful, kids. And on this end, don't get me going now, dang it. I've done all right. Leave me alone.
You know, Jake, I work in a corporation. I see how this works, especially in the month of January or, around that end of year time. There are changes that are made, and maybe this was part of it. And maybe, this was, Jerry needs to go in order to save some young person's job.
You know what? I think once he gets a little distance from Scottsbluff, moves to Denver, has a few months out of the anchor chair, he might actually be a little more candid about what really happened.
Well, we'll make some calls.
Call him up.
All right. I will talk to you later.
All right, see you, Mark.
Okay, have a good one.
Bye.
Oh, okay, bring it down. The timing was right. Wanted to get through the holidays. I was trying to delay things as much as possible. And like I say, Grays would I'd still be there. If I had kids and family in Scottsbluff, I'd still be doing the new news. If I had not changed ownerships and those, let's say I had just maintained 52 years, I would be talking differently to you now. I would be sobbing at the frustration and the sadness of it all. Because no employee should ever have to go through that. I'll tell you exactly what's going on. They had a nice guy like you in one of the stations a few years prior, going to do a nice story, and it turned into a horrible piece where there were lawsuits filed and stuff. Oh my God. And we invited this guy into our home, you know, so to speak. So my only defense is that they've been burned so many times.
Wasn't there the thought to promote it more, or did you kind of...
I put the dampers to it. I did not want the, I'm just not comfortable with that awards type of thing, hoopla type of deal. I wanted the transition to be rather low-key and quiet. It was just time. I was comfortable with the time. Gray's made the transition exceptionally painless. I went out of there under the best of terms, my own circumstances as to when I left and how I left. And if it seemed a little low-key, it was because that's exactly how I wanted it to be. Prices, for God's sake. Whew. I paid twice as much for half the house in Denver that I owned in Scottsbluff. And I have no regrets, and there's not a great deal I would do any different than what I've done. We're going to have the weather along with the town crier and the market, but first, a look at the news.
All right, that's a wrap. Anything else?
No, Newman out.
Going to Qdoba, right?
Sure.
North Platte.
Reverse Pioneer, back east.
It is hard for you to get
a word in edgewise?
You got to kind of talk over them.
Oh, you cannot.
A little?
Yeah.
No?
You don't understand that because you just won't stop. Once he gets going, he won't stop.
That makes it sound like a media hog or something.
You are.
Not.
Absolutely.
I'm just trying to bail your keys around.
Anything else strikes you about this, or?
I mean, I'm just amazed that you have a camera and a light stand. I'm just amazed that this is happening.
Did you have those jeans in junior high?
I got them. I got them within the last 2 years. I got them within the last 2 years. They're very big in the indie rock community.
Oh,
actually.
So they have Jerry, who anchors the noon show, so he can say, "Lucky Coconhour will be your caller." The Jills and Bills are having a square dance tonight. Lucky Coconhour will be your caller.
Jake, did you have any questions for Jerry? Jake, you still there?
He's dozing over on the couch. Should I wake him? Jakey? Jaker. Okay, he's okay.
We have the aesthetic Stairway to Nowhere. I still haven't been able to incorporate that into an investigation, you know, kind of come sliding down the banister there. But hey, it looks good.
I was the interim news director for a time, but I don't know that he would, you know, because it's been so long. Girls. These are my kids. Sorry, Mark. Get out of the background, girls. Ugh.
When I was working there, I don't know, I started getting letters from some girl in Baird or Bridgeport, and they were kind of weird. Like, they had spider webs written on the envelopes, and they're like, oh, so I see you're not dating your co-anchor or something like that. That's cool. And I was like, who is this weird person? So I showed them to Jerry, and Jerry's like, bud, I wouldn't get involved in someone like this. You never know what's going to happen. I said, yeah, Jerry, this is too weird for me. I'm not going to get involved with it. So soon after, I got my job in Kearney, and I left. I had a few friends still at the TV station. Well, about a month or two later, apparently that girl sent some risque photos of herself to the TV station, and Jerry got them, and he wouldn't let anyone else look at them. He kept them under wraps because he didn't want them surfacing outside the station or whatever. But I remember I got a call from Jerry like a month later, and he said, hey bud, remember when I told you that you shouldn't get involved with that girl? Well, she sent some photos of herself to the station, and I might have given you some bad advice.
That's all, folks. Oh my gosh, I stepped in the cord. Okay.